Google has released the top trending searches in Canada this year.
All right, let's take a closer look now at what Canadians were curious about this year. So instead of Googling it, we're going to Google. Google Canada's trends expert, Hibaq Ali, is joining us live here on Live at Noon. So what are Canadians curious about, or what were Canadians, I should say, curious about in 2022, Hibaq?
So 2022 was a year of big moments that brought us together. After 2 years of uncertainty, Canadians were looking for ways to support each other and also to embrace the new normal. So last year we saw a lot of search terms around the pandemic, but this year the #1 search term was Wordle. And interestingly enough, the Canadian version, Knuckle, also made the list for the top trending searches. So this web-based word game is taking the world by storm.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is very interesting indeed. And what are some other trends that kind of stood out to you?
Well, a big topic was Ukraine, of course, and never before have we seen spillover for one search term across so many categories. So Canadians were looking for information about how to help Ukraine and how to pronounce Kiev. So a big search term for us this year.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Now, I also understand, like, here we are, we're sitting here doing a news program, and of course, people want to find out about the news, and a lot of people turn to Google to sort of say, hey, what's happening with, or et cetera, et cetera. So, Hibaq, what were the big sort of searches when it came to news this year?
So, I don't think it's a surprise that the Oscars made the list this year after that incident between Chris Rock and Will Smith had a lot of people searching for the Oscars. Another one was the Rogers outage that took place earlier in the year when people were struggling to connect. Of course, Canadians turned to Google to find out what was happening. And then a big one was the CNE. So, of course, it reopened this year after 2 years of being closed because of the pandemic. And I think this really goes to show that Canadians were excited about getting back to normal and looking for ways to connect in person again.
Right. And, on that list we're showing on our board, Ukraine once again topping that list. And Time Magazine today has just announced that President Volodymyr Zelensky is their Time Person of the Year. When you compare this year's trend searches to last year's, obviously the pandemic is no longer in the limelight. But is there anything that kind of carried over from last year?
Well, of course, we've seen a couple of questions about COVID-19 showing up on this list. But again, last year was really focused on the pandemic and the vaccine. And this year, I think our lists are a little bit more diverse. So people were looking at politics, they were looking at entertainment, they were looking at sports. So a lot more diversity in the list this year.
And Hibaq, can you give us a sense of, like, to get into the top 10 example, like, how many searches are we talking about for Ukraine, for example? I mean, are we talking like tens of millions, hundreds of millions? I mean, what does it take to be in the top 10 in terms of searches and queries?
So I think what's important to remember is that the list that we're looking at right now are our top trending searches. So, of course, there are terms that people turn to Google to search for every single day that are quite popular. But what we look at for these top trending search terms are what spiked this year, what looks different this year that we haven't seen in years past. And with the situation in Ukraine, I think that's why it sort of topped our list and is really on top of minds for Canadians.
And Hibaq, can I ask you, what is the weirdest thing Google has seen being put into their little search bar? Can you divulge that?
Well, people search for all different things. So hard to say, but I think one thing that's really interesting this year is entertainment. I think compared to last year, we didn't see as much searches for entertainment, at least spiking last year. And I think that's because, Hollywood slowed down during the pandemic like the rest of the world. But, this year, Canadians are getting back to Hollywood news and Hollywood trends, and they're really discussing that celebrity gossip again. And I think it's because it's a bit of a shared social bonding experience for Canadians. And we talk about these things with our friends and our colleagues and even among strangers online. So it's interesting to see that celebrity news making top lists again this year.
It's certainly, Hibaq, interesting to see what Canadians ultimately have been interested in over the past 12 months, really. So we appreciate this sort of run through here. That's Google Canada Trends expert Hibaq Ali joining us live. Thanks, Hibaq. Appreciate this.
Thank you.